Almost a decade ago, in June 2012, the UN Human Rights Council passed a resolution that said the same rights that people have offline must also be protected online. Other resolutions followed on the same lines in 2014, 2016, and later. In subsequent resolutions, the Human Rights Council also called upon the UN member states to take a human rights-based approach to providing and expanding access to the internet. In essence, by saying that the same rights should be extended and protected online, the UN Human Rights Council challenges the notion that the virtual world is something that exists outside the real world. And this is what we'll discuss in today's episode of the Digital Cauldron. I'm Ayman Malik.
I'm Sadaf Khan.
And today we'll discuss whether legally there's a difference between our virtual and real lives.
Well, the principle of digital online-offline equivalence basically means that the same rights that you have in the real world, they should be translating in the virtual world as well. So for example, as a citizen of Pakistan, all of us have the right to freedom of expression, freedom of association, assembly, we can gather, we have a right to privacy. And the principle of digital and online-offline equivalence means that the same rights should be extending to the online sphere. Now the problem is we know what the principle is, but just knowing the principle doesn't really explain how we achieve that equivalence.
Right. So can't we just apply the same rules and the same laws that we use in the physical space in the virtual space as well?
Well, I wish it was that simple.
Okay.
However, the same rights don't translate in the same way. So let's take the example of privacy. As a citizen, your constitution guarantees you the right to privacy, and how we kind of promote that right, how that right is protected, is that your house, your private spaces are yours. So even if a law enforcement body has to enter that space, they will have to go through a legal procedure, they will have to get a warrant. Within your space, you make all the decisions. You have the agency, you decide who has the keys, you decide which of your things are kept, how they're secured, how everything works together, right? But imagine the same scenario online. Think about your inbox, think about your Facebook page. So even though it's your personal space, whatever you have on those spaces is not actually under your control. You don't have the agency. You share a lot of data and information with a big tech company about whom you don't really know what they do with your data, how they store your data, how they use your data, how they further share your data. And more importantly, if let's say a law enforcement agency, if the government wanted access to your information in the physical world, they will have to get a warrant. But if they had to get the same information in the digital world, they'll simply write to the corporation, to the social media company who's hosting that information.
And they can just receive the data from
Exactly. So they bypass it. And so the principle, while in principle it's a good principle, it's a principle that should be, it's not very easy to translate in the same way when it comes to the online spaces.
So is there a different mechanism when we apply these rules for privacy, for instance, online and offline?
So there have to be, but we run into a few challenges. The first challenge obviously is the same things, the same problems, the same protections are very different online due to the technological design of the internet itself.
Right.
The second challenge is the implications might be very different online and offline. So the implication of invasion of your privacy for a day, let's say somebody enters your house, that's very different from let's say somebody enters your inbox, because then you don't know what has been downloaded, where they have been stored. Your digital assets are not the same as your physical assets, so the implications differ. But the most important, I think, and the most complex challenge to deal with is there are rights whose equivalence just might not exist online. Right. So for example, digital disinformation campaigns, the way they exist in the virtual world, nothing goes viral in the offline space in the same way, right? So there are various things where there no offline equivalence varies. And finally, when we look at the digital world, everything is governed by a variety of jurisdictions, whether there's jurisdiction of space, how many seas and countries do the data cables pass through, how many national jurisdictions do the actual data and content pass through. Similarly, when it comes to law enforcement, what goes under police, what goes under FIA. So the jurisdiction, they combine and clash, which makes this whole area very complex to legislate around.
Right. So, we are left with questions. With so many challenges, how exactly is online-offline equivalence supposed to be achieved? Starting with the policy statement laying out intent may be a good start. Then it would require review of laws, enactment of new protections like data protection and privacy laws. But given the nature of this conundrum, it is likely that a lot more complexities will arise. In our next episode, we will explore these questions and discuss how they apply to different rights. So, stay tuned to the Digital Cauldron to learn which other challenges are brewing in cyberspace.